When I signed the papers for the $2 million penthouse, I could see my son's face through the window of the real estate office. His mouth was hanging open, and his wife Jessica looked like she'd seen a ghost. You see, just 1 week earlier, Michael had called me a burden and told me we can't afford to keep you. He had no idea that I was worth $17 million. But let me back up and tell you how a 72-year-old widow who everyone thought was barely getting by became the owner of the most expensive penthouse in the city, and why my own son deserved to watch his world fall apart. My name is Eleanor Patterson. I'm 72 years old and I live in Denver, Colorado. Well, I used to live in a modest apartment on the east side of town. Now I'm looking out at the Rocky Mountains from the 35th floor of Metropolitan Tower, and I've never been happier. It all started when I sold my business. You see, for the past 4 years I'd been building something incredible right under my family's nose. While they thought I was just a struggling widow living on my late husband's pension, I was actually creating a catering empire that would make me rich beyond my wildest dreams. But here's the thing about family. Sometimes the people you love most are the ones who see you the least. They had no idea what I was capable of. They saw an old woman who needed their charity, when really, I was the one keeping their whole lifestyle afloat. When I heard Michael call me a burden, something inside me snapped. Not with anger but with clarity. I realized that the greatest gift I could give my ungrateful family was to stop giving them anything at all. And that's exactly what I did. The penthouse purchase was just the beginning. What happened next taught my son and his wife a lesson they'll never forget about assumptions, respect, and what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. This is my story of how I went from burden to boss, and why sometimes the best revenge is simply living well. Before we continue, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from and subscribe for more stories like mine. 4 years ago, after my husband Harold passed away, I felt completely lost. We'd been married for 47 years. And suddenly I was alone in our little house in Denver with nothing but memories, and $5,000 from his life insurance policy. I didn't know what to do with myself. Harold had always handled the finances, and I'd focused on raising Michael and keeping house. But I'd always loved cooking. Even when Michael was growing up, neighbors would ask me to cater their small parties. I made the best lasagna in the neighborhood, and my dinner rolls were famous at church potlucks. So I thought, why not try turning my passion into something more? I started small. I used that $5,000 to get a food service license and buy some professional equipment. I called it Eleanor's Elegant Events. And I worked right out of my kitchen. My first job was making sandwiches for a law office meeting, $25 for 3 dozen sandwiches. I was so proud of that first payment. During this time I noticed Michael and Jessica were struggling financially. They'd bought a house right before Harold died, and with little Emma starting school, money was tight. Jessica had quit her job to stay home with Emma. And Michael's salary at the insurance company wasn't quite covering everything. So I started helping them out. I'd send them money every month, whatever I could manage. At first it was just $200 here and there. When Emma needed new clothes for school, I'd somehow find the money. When their car broke down, I'd scrape together the repair costs. Michael would always say, "Mom, you shouldn't be giving us your whole pension. You need to take care of yourself first." But I told him not to worry about it. I said I was getting by just fine on Harold's pension and Social Security. The truth was, my little catering business was growing faster than I'd ever imagined. That first year, I made $50,000. Not bad for a widow working out of her kitchen. By the second year, I was doing corporate events and making $200,000. By year 3, I was catering weddings and big parties, bringing in $500,000 annually. But I lived the same way I always had. I kept my modest apartment, drove my old Honda, shopped at discount stores. I reinvested every penny back into the business. I bought better equipment, hired part-time help, and started building relationships with vendors and event planners throughout Colorado. Michael and Jessica had no idea what I was really doing. When they'd visit, they'd see me in my old apron, flour in my hair, and assume I was just baking cookies for the church sale. They'd make comments like, "Mom, you work so hard for so little money. Maybe you should just relax and enjoy retirement." Jessica would sometimes say things like, "Eleanor, You really should update your wardrobe. People notice these things. She meant well, but she had no idea I was choosing to dress modestly while I built my empire. The monthly help I was giving them grew as my business grew. By year 3, I was sending them $2,500 every month. They thought it was my entire pension from Harold's job. They'd thank me and say how grateful they were that I was sacrificing for their family. But I wasn't sacrificing anything. That $2,500 was pocket change compared to what I was bringing in. I was happy to help them while I focused on building something bigger. By year 4, Eleanor's Elegant Events was handling million-dollar corporate retreats and celebrity weddings. I had contracts with 3 major hotels in Denver and was the preferred caterer for the city's biggest law firms and tech companies. I was making more money than I'd ever dreamed possible. Then, 8 months ago, something incredible happened. A national restaurant chain approached me with an offer I couldn't refuse. They wanted to buy Eleanor's Elegant Events for $17 million. $17 million. They loved my recipes, my client base, and my reputation. They wanted to expand my concept across the western United States. I signed those papers on a Tuesday morning in my lawyer's office, and just like that, I was rich. Not comfortable, not well off, but actually wealthy. The kind of wealthy where money would never be a worry again. But I didn't tell anyone. I wanted time to figure out what this meant for my life. I kept living in my little apartment, kept driving my Honda, kept sending Michael his monthly payments. I was planning to surprise everyone when the time was right. My lease was set to expire in a few months, and I thought maybe that would be the perfect opportunity to reveal everything. I'd find a beautiful new place, maybe somewhere with a view of the mountains, and show my family that their sacrificing grandmother had actually become a very successful businesswoman. I had no idea that my son and his wife had very different plans for my future. 2 months before my lease was set to expire, I called Michael to let him know I'd need to find a new place. I kept up the pretense that I was looking for affordable senior housing, partly because I still hadn't decided exactly how to reveal my new situation. "Michael, honey," I said, "my landlord isn't renewing my lease. I'm looking for a new apartment. Do you have any suggestions for affordable housing in Denver?" The silence on the other end was telling. Then I heard Jessica's voice in the background, sharp and panicked. "Oh God, she's going to ask to move in with us. I can't deal with that right now." Michael cleared his throat. "Mom, you know we're really tight on space here. Emma's got her room. We converted the spare bedroom into Jessica's office, and we're barely managing as it is." "I understand," I said gently. "I'm not asking to move in with you. I just wondered if you knew of any nice senior apartment complexes." "Oh right," Michael said, sounding relieved. "Well, there's Sunset Manor on the south side. It's supposed to be affordable for people on fixed incomes." Fixed incomes. If only he knew. The next week, I went to visit them for Emma's 10th birthday party. I brought a beautiful cake from a bakery downtown, one that cost more than most people spend on groceries in a week. But I presented it as something I'd managed to afford for my granddaughter's special day. During the party, Jessica made several comments that stung more than she realized. "Eleanor, you really should consider updating your wardrobe. I know money's tight, but people do judge you by how you look. Maybe we could take you shopping at some discount stores." I was wearing a simple cardigan and slacks that I'd bought at a thrift store, not because I had to, but because I was comfortable in them. But Jessica saw poverty where I saw choice. Later, when we were cleaning up, Michael pulled me aside. "Mom, I've been thinking about your financial situation. That monthly money you send us. You really shouldn't be giving us everything you have. Keep some for yourself. We can manage without it if we have to." The irony was incredible. He was worried about me giving them money I couldn't afford, when actually I was giving them what amounted to pocket change from my new fortune. "Don't worry about me," I said. "I'm managing just fine." But I started noticing things. The way Jessica would change the subject when I talked about my apartment hunt, the way Michael would get uncomfortable when I mentioned needing to find something affordable, the hushed conversations that would stop when I entered the room. One evening I arrived a few minutes early to pick up Emma for a movie. I let myself in with the key they'd given me, and I could hear them talking in the kitchen. She's getting to that age, Jessica was saying. My grandmother went through the same thing. First it's the apartment hunting, then it's forgetting to pay bills, then it's falling in the bathroom. We need to start thinking about what we're going to do. I know, Michael replied. But what choice do we have? We can't afford to take care of her if she gets worse. That's not our responsibility, Jessica said firmly. She raised you, now you've got your own family to think about. Emma needs to come first. I stood there in the hallway, listening to them discuss my future like I was already incapacitated. These people who had been accepting my financial help for years were talking about me like I was a problem to be solved. The apartment hunting conversations got worse. Michael would call me with suggestions for places that were clearly bottom-of-the-barrel senior housing. Mom, I found this place called Golden Years Village. It's only $800 a month, and it's got a community room. I drove by Golden Years Village. It was a depressing complex with tiny units and a parking lot full of rusty cars. The kind of place where people go when they've given up on life. Meanwhile, I was secretly touring penthouses downtown. I'd tell Michael I was at the grocery store, but actually I was meeting with real estate agents, looking at properties with city views and doormen. The contrast was surreal. During one family dinner, Jessica made a comment that particularly hurt. Eleanor, you've been so generous with us over the years. But you need to start thinking about your own future. You can't keep living like you're wealthy when you're not. Living like I'm wealthy when I'm not. I was sitting on $17 million. And she was lecturing me about financial reality. The worst part was watching how they talked about my money. Jessica would say things like, "We're so grateful for Eleanor's sacrifice. She gives us her whole pension because she loves Emma so much." They had turned my choice to help them into a narrative about my sacrifice. They saw me as a selfless grandmother giving away money I couldn't afford to give, when actually I was a successful businesswoman who was choosing to be generous. But the generosity was starting to feel less like love, and more like enabling. They were comfortable accepting my help, while simultaneously planning my future without consulting me. They were grateful for my money while being embarrassed by my presence. The final straw came during a conversation about Emma's future. Jessica was talking about private school options, and Michael mentioned they'd need to budget carefully. "Well," Jessica said, "we'll have less to work with once Eleanor gets settled somewhere. We can't expect her to keep supporting us when she's going to need that money for her own care." Her own care. Like I was already halfway to a nursing home. That night, I sat in my apartment and realized something important. My family didn't see me as a person with agency and capability. They saw me as an elderly woman in decline, who was temporarily useful as a source of financial support. They were planning my future based on their assumptions about my limitations, not on any conversation they'd had with me about my actual needs or desires. And the most painful part, they were doing it all while accepting my money, thanking me for my sacrifice, and patting themselves on the back for being grateful. I decided it was time for them to learn who they were really dealing with. But first, I wanted to hear exactly what they thought of me when they didn't know I was listening. That opportunity came sooner than I expected. 6 weeks before my lease was set to expire, I decided it was time to have a serious conversation with Michael about my housing situation. I had my lawyer Robert Chen on speed dial, ready to reveal everything and start planning my new life. I thought maybe this would be the perfect moment to surprise them with the truth about my success. I drove over to their house on a Saturday afternoon, bringing Emma a new art set I'd picked up downtown. As I walked up to the front door, I could hear voices from the kitchen window, which was slightly open to let in the cool Denver air. I was about to knock when I heard Jessica's voice, sharp and frustrated. "Michael, we need to talk about your mother's situation. This has gone on long enough." Something in her tone made me pause. I stepped closer to the window, staying out of sight behind their pine tree. "What do you mean?" Michael asked, though his voice sounded tired, like they'd had this conversation before. "I mean, we cannot have Eleanor move in here. I don't care if she's family, or if she's been helping us financially. She will completely cramp our style, and I refuse to become a caregiver to your mother." My heart started pounding. "Move in here?" I'd never even suggested such a thing. "Jessica. She's not asking to move in," Michael said weakly. "She's looking for her own place." "Are you kidding me?" Jessica's voice got louder. "Michael, Wake up. She's 72 years old. She's got no money except that tiny pension, and she's been giving us everything she has. What happens when she can't afford rent anymore? What happens when she gets sick? What happens when she can't take care of herself? There was a long pause. Then Michael said something that made my blood run cold. I know you're right. I feel guilty. She's been so good to us. Good to us? Jessica laughed bitterly. Michael, she's been giving us money she can't afford to give because she wants to play the generous grandmother. That's not being good to us. That's being irresponsible. And now we're going to be stuck, dealing with the consequences. I felt like I'd been slapped. Irresponsible. I was giving them money from a $17 million fortune, and she was calling me irresponsible. Look, Jessica continued. I've been thinking about this a lot. We need to set boundaries now before this gets worse. We can't afford to keep her. Not financially. Not emotionally. Not practically. She's a burden, Michael. And she's only going to get worse. The word hit me like a physical blow. Burden. My own son was about to hear his wife call me a burden, and I was waiting to hear how he'd defend me. You're right, Michael said quietly. We can't take care of her. We've got Emma to think about. Our own future to plan for. Mom's had her whole life to prepare for this. My legs felt weak. I reached out and steadied myself against the tree trunk. Exactly, Jessica said, sounding relieved. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to find her the cheapest place possible, something she can afford on her actual income, and we're going to make it clear that she needs to figure out her own life. But what about the money she's been giving us? Michael asked. What about it? Michael, she's been giving us her whole pension because she wants to feel needed. That's not our fault. But we can't keep accepting it if it means we're going to be responsible for her later. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They were making me sound like a desperate old woman buying their love with money I couldn't afford to give. I think, Jessica continued, we need to gradually start refusing her help. Make it clear that we're fine on our own, that she needs to keep her money for her own care. That way, when she ends up in some state facility, we can honestly say we tried to make her be more responsible. State facility. They were already planning to put me in a nursing home. That makes sense, Michael agreed. We'll tell her we don't need her help anymore, that we want her to focus on her own security. And in the meantime, Jessica said, we find her somewhere cheap but safe. Somewhere she won't be our problem anymore. Our problem. I stood there behind that tree, listening to my son and his wife discuss me like I was a broken appliance they needed to dispose of. There's that place on the south side, Michael said. Sunset Manor, it's like $900 a month, and it's got meal service. She could probably afford that. Perfect, Jessica replied. And it's far enough away that she won't be dropping by all the time. We can visit her once a month. Make sure she's okay, but we won't be constantly dealing with her needs. Once a month. They were planning to visit me once a month. I feel bad about this, Michael said. But he didn't sound that bad about it. He sounded relieved. Don't feel bad, Jessica said firmly. This is what happens when people don't plan properly for their old age. Your mom chose to give away her money instead of saving it. She chose to live like she was wealthy when she wasn't. Now she gets to live with those choices. Live like I was wealthy when I wasn't. I was worth $17 million, and they were planning to warehouse me in a budget senior facility because they assumed I was broke. But then Jessica said something that cut deeper than anything else. Honestly, Michael, sometimes I think it would be easier if she just, wasn't our problem anymore. I know that sounds terrible, but she's going to get worse, and we're going to be stuck dealing with it. What do you mean? Michael asked. I mean, how long do we have to pretend to be grateful for her help when really we're just waiting for her to become completely dependent on us? She's already forgetting things, already needing help with stuff. In 5 years, she'll probably have dementia or something. And then what? We'll be stuck taking care of her because we accepted her money. Forgetting things? I ran a multi-million-dollar business for years. I wasn't forgetting anything. Maybe, Jessica continued, it would be better for everyone if she just moved away, somewhere far enough that we could still claim we're caring children, but where she wouldn't be our daily responsibility. Like where? Michael asked. I don't know. Maybe she's got a sister somewhere. Or old friends. Somewhere she could be someone else's problem. Someone else's problem. That's what I was to them. Not a person. Not a mother. Not a grandmother who loved them. Just a problem to be solved. The important thing, Jessica said, is that we handle this carefully. We don't want to look like bad people. We just want to protect our own family. You're right, Michael said. We'll help her find a place, make sure she's settled, and then we can focus on our own lives without feeling guilty about it. And Michael, Jessica's voice got very serious. We cannot let Emma get too attached to her. Kids don't understand when elderly people become burdens. We need to start limiting the time they spend together. They were planning to cut me off from my granddaughter, the little girl I'd been supporting, whose art supplies I'd been buying, whose birthday cakes I'd been providing. They were going to limit my time with her because I might become a burden. I heard chairs scraping against the floor and I realized they were finishing their conversation. I quickly walked back to my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled for my keys. I sat in the driver's seat for a long time, staring at their house. Through the window, I could see Emma playing in the living room, completely unaware that her parents were planning to separate her from her grandmother. All those years of helping them, all those monthly payments, all those times I'd scraped together money for their emergencies. And this was what they really thought of me. I wasn't a generous mother who'd built a successful business. I wasn't a loving grandmother who chose to share her good fortune. I was a burden, a problem, someone to be managed and eventually disposed of. They thought I was giving them money I couldn't afford because I was desperate for their love. They thought I was irresponsible and unprepared. They thought I was already declining mentally and would soon need to be put somewhere safe and cheap. But the worst part was that they were making these plans while still accepting my money. They were going to keep taking my monthly payments right up until the moment they shipped me off to some budget facility. I pulled out my phone and called Robert Chen. When he answered, I said, Robert, I need to see you Monday morning, and I need you to help me send a message. What kind of message, Eleanor? The kind that teaches people not to mistake kindness for weakness. I drove home that day knowing exactly what I was going to do. They wanted to plan my future without consulting me. They wanted to treat me like a problem to be solved. They wanted to warehouse me somewhere cheap and convenient. Well, they were about to learn that the problem they'd been planning to solve was actually the solution to all their problems. And without me, they were going to discover just how expensive their lives really were. The game had changed. And I was the only one who knew the rules. Monday morning I sat in Robert Chen's law office, still processing what I'd heard through that kitchen window. Robert had been my lawyer for the business sale, and he'd become more than just my attorney. He was one of the few people who understood what I'd accomplished. Eleanor, you look upset, he said, pouring me coffee from his office machine. What's going on? I told him everything. About the conversation I'd overheard. About Jessica calling me a burden. About their plans to ship me off to Sunset Manor, and limit my time with Emma. Robert listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Eleanor, I have to ask you something. Are you absolutely certain you want to reveal your financial situation to them? Because once you do this, there's no going back. Robert, they think I'm irresponsible with money. They think I'm declining mentally. They think I'm giving them my whole pension because I'm desperate for their love. They're planning to put me in a $900 a month facility while they keep living the lifestyle my money has been supporting. And you want to show them the truth? I want to show them consequences, I said firmly. I want them to understand what they're actually losing when they lose me. Robert nodded slowly. Okay, let's talk about your options. First, the penthouse. You've been looking at Metropolitan Tower, right? The one with the view of the Rocky Mountains? Unit 35A, I said. $2 million. I can pay cash. And you want to buy it now? I want to buy it this week. I want to be moved in before my lease expires. I want them to see exactly what their burden has been capable of all along. Robert made notes on his legal pad. What about the financial support you've been giving them? The monthly transfers? I want to stop them gradually. I don't want to be cruel, but I want them to understand the real impact of losing me. How much have you been giving them monthly? $2,500. They think it's my entire pension from Harold's job. They have no idea it's just pocket change from my business income. Robert whistled low. So they're about to lose $30,000 a year in support, and they don't even know it. That's just the monthly payments, I said. There's also the emergency help. When their car broke down last year, I gave them $4,000. When Emma needed dental work, I covered the $3,000 bill. When they wanted to renovate their kitchen, I helped with $8,000. How much total would you estimate you've given them over the past 4 years? I'd been thinking about this since Saturday night. Probably close to $200,000. Maybe more. Robert set down his pen. Eleanor, they have no idea they've been living on a $200,000 subsidy from you? None. They think I'm this struggling widow who's been sacrificing everything for them out of love. They feel guilty about taking my money, but they keep taking it because they think I need to feel useful. And now they're planning to cut you off because they don't want to be responsible for you when you become more burdensome. Exactly. They want to accept my help while I'm useful, then warehouse me somewhere cheap when I'm not. Robert was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. Eleanor, I think we can design a response that's both educational and fair. But I need you to be sure about this. Are you prepared for the possibility that this could permanently damage your relationship with them? I thought about Emma, about missing her childhood, about not being there for her school plays and birthday parties. Then I thought about Jessica's voice saying it would be easier if I just wasn't their problem anymore. Robert, they've already damaged the relationship. They just don't know it yet. All right then. Let's make a plan. Over the next 2 hours, Robert and I designed what he called a strategic withdrawal of support. It wasn't about revenge, he explained. It was about establishing boundaries and letting natural consequences teach the lessons that words couldn't. First, Robert said, we buy the Penthouse, cash offer, quick closing. I'll handle all the paperwork. When do you want to move in? As soon as possible. I want to be settled before I have the conversation with them. Good. Next, we gradually reduce your financial support. This week, we stop the monthly transfers. 2 weeks later, we remove you as co-signer on their credit cards. A month after that, we stop the emergency fund support. Will they be able to manage without my help? Robert pulled out a calculator. Let's see. Michael makes about $60,000 a year at the insurance company, right? Their mortgage is $3,200 a month. Car payments are about $600, and they've got credit card payments of probably $800 to $1,000 monthly. He did the math quickly. Their basic expenses are around $5,000 a month. Michael's take-home pay is probably around $4,000, so they've been living about $1,000 beyond their means, not counting the emergency expenses you've been covering. So they can't actually afford their current lifestyle? Not without your help. They've been living like a family that makes $80,000 a year when they actually make $60,000. Your monthly support has been the difference between their dream life and their actual life. I felt a mix of sadness and anger. They've been building a lifestyle on my money while planning to abandon me. That's exactly what they've been doing. And Eleanor, there's something else you should know. I ran a credit check on them last week, just to understand their financial situation better. What did you find? They're more dependent on you than you realize. Michael has been using you as a co-signer on multiple credit cards. If you remove your name, their credit limits will drop significantly. They've also been using your financial support as proof of income for various loans. So when I stop helping them, their whole financial house of cards starts to collapse. Not immediately, but gradually. First the credit cards get declined. Then they realize they can't make their mortgage payment. Then they start having to make choices about what they can actually afford. Is that fair? Robert leaned back in his chair. Eleanor, you've been subsidizing their lifestyle for years while they've been treating you like a burden. You've been generous while they've been ungrateful. You've been building wealth while they've been assuming you're broke. Fair is letting them live the life they can actually afford. What about Emma? I don't want her to suffer. Emma will be fine. Kids are resilient. And honestly, learning that actions have consequences might be good for this family. We spent the next hour working out the details. Robert would handle the penthouse purchase, coordinate with the moving company, and prepare all the financial documents I'd need to show them exactly what they were losing. There's one more thing, Robert said as we were finishing up. How do you want to tell them? Do you want to sit them down and explain everything? Or do you want to let them discover it gradually? I thought about this carefully. I want them to discover it the same way I discovered their true feelings about me. I want them to be shocked. So you want to show them, not tell them? I want them to walk into my penthouse and realize that everything they thought they knew about me was wrong. I want them to understand that the person they were planning to abandon was actually the person holding their whole life together. Robert nodded approvingly. That's very elegant, Eleanor. Much more effective than just telling them you're rich. When can we start? I'll make the offer on the penthouse this afternoon. With a cash offer, we can probably close by next week. The moving company I work with can have you packed and relocated within days of closing. And the financial support? I'll stop the automatic transfers today. When Michael calls to ask about the missing payment, what do you want to tell him? I thought about this. I'll tell him there must be a banking error. Let him think it's temporary while we get everything else in place. Perfect. That gives us time to coordinate everything. As I was leaving Robert's office, he stopped me at the door. Eleanor, can I ask you something personal? Of course. Are you doing this because you're hurt? Or because you think it's the right thing to do? I considered the question carefully. Both. I'm hurt because they saw me as a problem to be solved instead of a person to be loved. But I also think it's the right thing to do, because they need to understand the difference between generosity and obligation. What do you mean? I chose to help them because I loved them and I could afford to. But they started seeing my help as something they deserved, something they could count on while planning to abandon me. They need to learn that generosity is a gift, not a right. Robert smiled. Eleanor, I think your son and daughter-in-law are about to get a very expensive education. The best kind, I said. The kind you never forget. That week, everything moved quickly. The penthouse offer was accepted within hours. The moving company began packing my apartment. Robert stopped my monthly transfers and started the paperwork to remove me from their credit accounts. And I began planning exactly how I wanted Michael and Jessica to discover their new reality. 3 days later, Michael called about the missing payment. His voice was concerned, but not panicked yet. Mom, I think there might be a problem with your bank. Your usual payment didn't come through this month. Oh dear, I said. There must be some kind of error. Let me look into it. Do you need help dealing with the bank? I know they can be confusing for... He stopped himself, but I knew what he was going to say. Confusing for elderly people. No, honey. I'll handle it. These things happen sometimes. Okay. But Mom, don't worry about it too much. We can manage for a month or two if there's a problem. A month or two? He thought they could manage without my help for a month or two. They had no idea they were about to find out what they could actually afford. By the end of the week, I was signing closing papers on the most beautiful penthouse in Denver. $2 million, paid in cash, with a view of the Rocky Mountains that took my breath away. I stood in my new living room, surrounded by moving boxes, and called Michael. Honey, I found a place. I'm all moved in. That's great, Mom. I'm so glad you found something affordable. What's the address? We'd love to come see it. It's Metropolitan Tower, downtown, Unit 35A. There was silence on the other end. Then Michael said, Mom, I think you gave me the wrong address. That's the most expensive building in the city. I know, I said simply. Why don't you and Jessica come over Saturday morning? I'd love to show you my new home. The silence stretched longer. Finally, Michael said, Mom, how did you afford a place in Metropolitan Tower? We'll talk about it Saturday. I have so much to tell you. Saturday morning couldn't come soon enough. I was ready to show my family exactly who they'd been planning to abandon. Saturday morning, I stood in my new penthouse, watching the sunrise paint the Rocky Mountains in shades of gold and pink. At exactly 10 o'clock, I heard the elevator open in the hallway, then confused voices getting louder. "This can't be right," Jessica was saying. "The penthouse? Michael, your mother gave us the wrong address." When I opened the door, both of them were standing there looking completely bewildered. "Mom," Michael said slowly, "I think there's been some kind of mistake. This is Metropolitan Tower. These are the most expensive apartments in Denver." "No mistake," I said, stepping aside to let them in. "Welcome to my new home." Jessica's mouth literally fell open as she walked into the living room. The floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the entire city, and my new furniture looked like something out of a magazine. "Eleanor," Jessica whispered. How is this possible?" I gestured for them to sit down. "Well, first I should probably clear up some confusion about my financial situation." I reached for a folder that Robert had prepared for me. "Do you remember my little catering business? The one you called my cooking hobby?" "Yeah," Michael said impatiently. "Mom, what does that have to do with—" "I sold it 8 months ago," I said simply. "For $17 million. The silence in the room was deafening. Jessica stared at me like I'd spoken in a foreign language. Michael's face went completely white. 17 million? Michael finally whispered. 17 million, I confirmed. Eleanor's Elegant Events grew from a $5,000 investment into a multi-million-dollar company. "But you were living like you were broke," Jessica said, her voice barely audible. "I was living modestly, because I was building a business empire. Every dollar I didn't spend on myself was a dollar I could reinvest in growth." Michael put his head in his hands. "Mom, why didn't you tell us?" "Because I wanted to help you without making you feel indebted. The $2,500 I sent you every month, that wasn't my whole pension, that was pocket change compared to what I was making." I opened the folder and showed them the bank statements. Jessica's hands were shaking as she looked at the papers. You're rich?" "I'm wealthy, yes. This penthouse? I paid cash for it. $2 million. "I know exactly what you thought," I said quietly. "I heard you talking last week. I heard you call me a burden. I heard you say you couldn't afford to keep me. I heard you planning to put me in Sunset Manor for $900 a month." Michael's face went from white to red. "Mom, you weren't supposed to. We didn't mean—" "What didn't you mean, Michael? That you think I'm declining mentally? That you wish I would just stop being your problem?" "We were trying to help you," Jessica protested. "Help me?" I stood up and walked to the window. "Jessica, you were planning to visit me once a month. You were going to limit Emma's time with me. You said it would be easier if I just wasn't your problem anymore." The room was silent, except for the sound of Jessica crying. "Michael, in 4 years, I gave you approximately $200,000. You never once asked where I was getting the money. You never wondered how a woman on a fixed income could afford to be so generous. We thought you were sacrificing for us," Jessica whispered. "I was choosing to share my good fortune with you. There's a difference." I sat back down and looked at both of them. "But that's all stopped now." "What do you mean?" Michael asked. "I mean the monthly transfers have ended. I've removed myself as co-signer on your credit cards. The emergency fund is closed. You're going to have to learn to live on what you actually make." Michael's face went white again. "Mom, we can't. Our mortgage is $3,200 a month. Our car payments. Our credit cards. We need that help." "No," I said firmly. "You need to learn to live within your means. You've been living like a family that makes $80,000 a year when you actually make $60,000. My money was the difference between your dream life and your real life." "Mom, please," Michael begged. "We made a mistake. We're sorry. We didn't understand." "You're right, you didn't understand. You didn't understand that I was choosing to help you. You didn't understand that I was successful and capable. You didn't understand that I was building a life while you were planning to dispose of me." I looked at Jessica, who was still crying. "You know what the saddest part is? I would have shared all of this with you. I would have included you in my new life, helped you build your own wealth. But you saw me as a burden instead of a resource. We can change, Jessica said desperately. We can do better. I'm sure you can. But you're going to have to do it without my financial support. Michael was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, Mom, what happens now? Now you learn to live the life you can actually afford. You make your own mortgage payments, handle your own emergencies, build your own security. And what about us? What about our relationship? I considered this carefully. That depends on you. If you can learn to see me as a person instead of a problem, if you can respect my choices and my capabilities, then maybe we can build something better. Can we visit Emma? Jessica asked. Emma is always welcome here. In fact, I'd love to have her stay with me sometimes. She should know her grandmother lives in a penthouse, not a nursing home. When they finally left, they both looked stunned. Michael kept shaking his head, like he couldn't believe what he'd learned. Jessica seemed to be calculating how much money they'd lost. But I felt lighter than I had in years. Over the following weeks, I watched their new reality unfold. Their credit cards were declined at restaurants. They had to return expensive items they'd bought thinking my help would continue. They put their house on the market and moved to a smaller place they could actually afford. Emma came to visit me the next weekend, and her eyes lit up when she saw the penthouse. Grandma, are you rich? She asked with the directness only children possess. I'm comfortable, I told her. And I'm happy. Good, she said, settling into the window seat with a book. You deserve to be happy. 3 months later, Michael called me. Mom, I want to apologize. Really apologize. We were wrong about everything. What made you realize that? I asked. Living without your help. Jessica and I had to sit down and figure out our actual budget, and we realized how much we'd been depending on you. We weren't grateful. We were entitled. And now? Now we're learning to live within our means. It's hard, but it's honest. And Mom, I'm proud of what you built. I'm proud of your success. I'm sorry it took losing it to appreciate it. You didn't lose it, Michael. You chose to see it as a burden instead of a gift. I know, and I'm sorry. As for me, I'm thriving. I've joined a book club with other successful women my age. I've started taking art classes and planning trips I never allowed myself to take. I've learned that the best revenge isn't getting even, it's living well. My penthouse has become a gathering place for my new chosen family. Friends who value my wisdom, my experience, and my company. People who see me as Eleanor the successful businesswoman, not Eleanor the elderly burden. Sometimes I look out at the mountains and think about Jessica's words. It would be easier if she just wasn't our problem anymore. She was right. It is easier. For all of us. I learned something important through all of this. Respect isn't something you can buy, even with $200,000 in gifts. But it is something you can command when you stop accepting less than you deserve. From my penthouse window, I can see the whole city spread out below me. It's a perfect view of the life I built for myself, by myself, despite what everyone else thought I was capable of. And that, I think, is the best view of all. So, that's my story. I'd love to hear what you think. Have you ever felt underestimated because of your age, only to surprise people with what you were really capable of? Let me know in the comments. And subscribe if you want to hear more stories like mine.